Hey, finance folk. Welcome to the EU Finance Podcast. Dr. Eva de Mol is the founder of the first and largest investment fund in technology startups in the Netherlands, founded by women, capital T. Eva earned her PhD from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam and the University of California at Berkeley, where she researched the factors that led to startup success. She followed more than 1,000 entrepreneurial teams over 5 years. Eva speaks a lot about the European tech sector and how innovation affects our lives. Eva is committed to more diversity in technology and entrepreneurship, and I'm happy to have a chance to chat with her about venture capital, or VC as we're going to refer to it, and the future of finance in the EU. So, Dr. de Mol, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into it. Now, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, so you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit. Tell me in simple words, what do you do as a venture capitalist?
Yeah, very good question. So a venture capitalist invests in really early stage companies. And early stage means has startups where there's just an MVP, so a minimum viable product, the initial product, or where you just have a few clients. So it's a really early stage of the company. And oftentimes there's only 2 to 4 people working there. So we invest really early, which obviously is also very risky. But if you invest in the right companies, there's also a lot of financial upside and a lot of adventure, of course.
Okay, you mentioned risk, and it's an oft-repeated truism that Europeans are pretty risk averse, especially in comparison to, let's say, like Americans. That results in many of our startups or whatever, when they start getting to the point where they want to raise big amounts of capital, that they go to the USA because the Americans are ready to plop down money for even very risky venture. Is there a way to change that risk-averse culture that Europeans have to being more open to taking risk and investing in startups?
No, very good point. Unfortunately, this is indeed the truth. So what we see is that when large amounts of money need to be raised, that oftentimes European investors, thank for that, because they're in some sense, too afraid to lose the money. That also has to do with the lack of, we have a lot of fear of failure. Mm-hmm. In Europe, we're not celebrating when we lose money, right? Or where we build a business and it fails. Whereas if we look at the US, also, failure is much more celebrated because you're laughing, but it's actually true. Like, I don't know, you've studied in the US, me too. And there, when something didn't go well, of course, you rather have things succeed. At the same time, it also was then the case that they said, okay, it failed, but you did it. You went out of your comfort zone and you tried to build something new, and it's fine. We move on. Whereas in Europe, it's oftentimes when something fails, when a business goes bankrupt, we tend to focus a lot on the negative there and forget that maybe before it went bankrupt, it was actually a pretty solid business. So it very much has to do with, I think, culture, but also that already goes back to high school, for example, and how we look at success and how we look at failure. And I heard this really interesting anecdote of a very successful US founder last week, Sarah Blakely. Her business went IPO. She's very successful, and she said that at the dinner table, her father always asked in the end of the week, okay, kids, have you done anything this week that failed? And if they didn't have anything, he said, okay, then we have a problem, because all you did is repeat things that you've done before, and you haven't done anything to go out of this comfort zone and look for new opportunities and try to innovate what you're already doing. And I think that cultural shift towards trying things and also accepting that failure is part of it is really important in building businesses. And as a side comment, the lack of risk taking, it does not only influence the number of large capital rounds in Europe. We also see a really lack of investors actually at the early stages of venture financing, because obviously that's the part where most of the risk needs to be taken. And unfortunately, to your point, we also see companies in our portfolio that actually flip to the US because their investors are more willing to put in money at earlier stages.
I guess they probably have more of a culture of thinking failure can breed success rather than failure is the end.
Yeah, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about it. Interesting enough, it's not only culture, also research shows that founders that failed a business in the past, if they start something new, they're more likely to be successful than founders that haven't failed at all.
Well, because they've learned something along the way.
I know, so failure experience is actually like a pro in a pitch or a resume. But if oftentimes, for example, I'm from the Netherlands, I think there we take it to the extreme. If someone failed or it didn't work out, it's like, it's probably not going to work out the next time. And I think changing that narrative is super important in creating more companies.
One of our main objectives here in the EU is with the Savings Investment Union. It's to mobilize more capital for small and medium enterprises. What do you think that the EU could do to foster growth in the innovation company sector? And what developments, if any, do you think or that you would like to see in this area?
Yeah, I think therefore it's twofold. First, we just need more capital. So more capital allocated to venture growth. I think that's one. And the second is on the side of the regulation to make sure that regulation is also on par with international regulation. And in that sense, that it also becomes easier for European startups and companies to compete on an international playing field.
Yeah, the last time that I spoke with our commissioner Albuquerque, she was talking about that. One of the most important things is that our companies should be able to have sustainable competition in the sense that compete sustainably, and this isn't just towards green stuff necessarily, but it's about having rules that level the playing field where they're able to compete without any major difficulties.
Yeah. Now, so to give you an example, also in our portfolio, we have the discussion like, okay, if we are looking at European regulation with respect to data and privacy, there are specific things that we simply cannot do. At the same time, we see that our competitors in building kind of the same company see different regulation. So that probably means that my companies are probably going to be less fast in developing and getting to specific new customers. And I think it's super important. Don't get me wrong. I think regulation is important. I think especially with AI, we have to look at safety, privacy, etc. But I feel that now we've come to a point where there's so much regulation that it holds some companies back in their competitive advantage. And I think I'm really a proud European investor. At the same time, you just see that a lot of startups are actually have moved out of Europe to other places because of regulation. And I think that's not what we need.
Let me switch gears here for a second because we're recording this podcast in the early part of March, just a couple of days after International Women's Day. Now, you are famous.
Well,
You
you tell me.
you're quite famous as being one of the premier women in venture capital. Now, venture capital is still mostly a male-dominated business. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Have you faced any challenges as a woman in this field? And what steps do you think could be taken to make this field more inclusive?
Yeah. No, of course. Although I think we agreed it's going to be a very positive podcast, right? No, so I think we do have a very big challenge, actually. If we look at venture capital allocated to, for example, female founders and diverse teams, I think it lays around 2%, 2 to 4% of all venture capital allocated, which, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense if we look at the opportunity there. And I think the biggest risk is that we're facing if we're investing in homogeneous teams. What we create is actually also products and services that are just not inclusive. And I think there's now many examples of these type of products and services. And especially if you look at AI, you also see this bias coming through. For example, if we look at airbags being tested only for male bodies, etc. And interestingly enough, so I'm working on a book, and I was actually looking for some information also at ChatGPT. And if you ask, for example, okay, can you give me an overview of the most successful founders? All you get is male founders. While we do know there's a lot of female founders that are very successful out there, but it's just the algorithm that are being built are, in that sense, not inclusive. And I think it really starts with venture capital and being also diverse there at the top, because venture capital can really serve as an equalizer actually within technology. Because in the end, I mean, investors, they're also a human, right? And people tend to invest in the stuff, the services and products that they like, that they're familiar with. And if we have a really male-dominated investor base, yeah, we're just not getting this type of diversity in the products and services that the world needs. I think if you look at the challenges that we currently face. Also, I think this is a very interesting stat. We see that female investors more often invest in climate-related companies and more in impact-related companies. Well, I think we need a lot of those right now. So that's on a more, I think, broader perspective if we look at the macro. Then to your second question, whether I faced had challenges, of course. Have we had instances where people said like, Eva, I really like what you're doing at Capital T, but unfortunately we already invested in a woman this year, so we're not going to invest. Yeah, and this was really in an email, like black on white, and I think it really shows that people are just not aware actually of how crazy it is to write this down in a message. Or we also had people telling us like, okay, you're going to raise a fund. Well, you're two ladies. We think it really makes sense. Or no, not it makes sense. You really need a man in your team. And yeah, you're laughing, but this was serious.
Well, no, it doesn't make. It's not good business sense. You got to look at the bottom line, at the numbers, not at the gender of the person that you're dealing with.
Well, not a lot of people do yet, unfortunately. And at some point, so many people kept telling us that we were like, okay, maybe it's best that if in our pitch deck we're just gonna put like a silhouette of a guy. To cover that. And the crazy part was that no one ever asked what this guy was going to do. They were just like, okay, at least they got a guy. It's fine. And then I think we raised around, 30 million. And we were like, okay, this guy...
He can stay.
He can. We need to get rid of this guy on our deck. So yeah, I faced challenges. At the same time, I mean, I don't get up in the morning thinking like, okay, I'm a woman in venture capital, what am I gonna do? I mean, I really like my job. I like being a venture capitalist, and I hope that people invest in me and work with me because of that, and not whether or not I am a woman. But yeah, I think it's really important also to break through these stereotypes that we celebrate. Role models, and also put a lot of attention on the things that are going well, because also if we keep emphasizing all the downsides, it's probably not gonna encourage female founders to start a business.
Let's go towards optimism then. What are the emerging trends in tech and venture capital that are exciting you as a pro in this the most? Are there any industries or innovations you believe are currently undervalued by investors?
Wow, really good question.
Well, I'm looking for investment. I'm kidding.
No, I think so. We are actually looking a lot at climate technology. And I think this is also a place where in Europe, we can really be a front runner if we compare to the US. So if we look at the data and reports, I think the last 2 years, Europe invested around almost 25% of all venture capital in sustainable businesses, whereas in the US, this number was around 4%. So that really means that there's gonna be value created from these type of companies in the next few years. So I think especially now where actually climate change, climate tech, climate initiatives are being pressured, I think as an investor, it's actually a super interesting industry to double down on, because we are just in a position to create these successful companies, and the groundwork has already been done. Now, secondly, obviously, as a tech investor, we're looking at opportunities in AI. I think we're being only in that sense a small fund. We are probably not going to invest in an LLM or a really foundational technology, but we're really looking for these companies that with their applications, have the ability to really disrupt some existing industries. And for example, I've invested recently in a company that's creating AI agents for the energy sector. And I really believe that with this type of technologies, a whole new wave of how we use products and services is going to exist. So I'm guessing you already knew about AI being an interesting sector, but I think it's going to be much bigger, the effects, than we currently see. And yesterday I spoke to someone and we were discussing that actually the same with the cloud, actually also with mobile, that we tend to overestimate the short-term effects of these type of technologies, but we underestimate the long-term effects of these type of technologies. So that's for sure something that we're really looking at.
You mentioned Europe being a front runner in climate stuff. Actually, listeners of the podcast know that I've got a thing for green things. And in fact, one of our recent podcasts was about climate benchmarks, which is a perfect example of the European Union exporting ideas, in this case through a regulation, to the rest of the world and setting the pace, setting the agenda for climate stuff. Yeah. So hopefully startups in Europe will also be the front runners, the lead of the class in establishing firms that turn fighting climate change into profitable companies.
Yeah, of course, because I think that is super interesting that you're mentioning profitable companies. For me, that's by default, right? Because I'm looking at both impact and commercially viable companies. But I like that you're emphasizing that, because sometimes people have the idea that if we talk about green companies, that we're talking about impact only, and we lose sight of economic relevance. Whereas, in fact, if you look at what these companies are doing, they're super commercially successful.
Speaking of which, you talk about founders, which, if I understand correctly, are the people that are starting these little companies.
They're
right?
oftentimes the first people to really
the ones in the garage building the computer.
Exactly.
Okay, so here's a theoretical question, but a theoretical question that comes not from my experience, but from my world. I'm Lithuanian, so in Lithuania, I know that we have a fair amount of startups, small startups that are in the drone business. Military drone, because we're trying to support Ukraine as much as we can. So naturally, people are gravitating to some people are gravitating to industries where they can help do that. So if a founder of a small military drone company in Lithuania were to come to you, what sort of advice would you give them of how to get funding and how to scale up?
Yeah, super interesting question. I think first, really important to think, okay, this goes a bit to like the more personal stuff. Why do you want to build this business, and why is it you that is going to do that? Because for me as an investor, that's most important, because passion and persistence is something that you really need if you want to grow a business, since it's so difficult and there's many challenges you're going to face. So that's first. Are you really the person to do this? Then second, obviously, is always in venture capital market size. So we're looking for companies that have the potential to become a unicorn. And to be really able to build a company of plus 100 million revenue, that's really something. So really think about, okay, how many customers do I need to get there? What is going to be my go-to-market strategy? How am I going to reach those companies? Really think that through. Then third, if we talk about drones, it's really technical. So do you have the technical talent in-house? That doesn't necessarily need to be in-house, but do you have a plan on how to get the talent in your company and get them to work for you? So more centered around the team. I'm not sure if this is an interesting stat or a depressing stat, but around 90% of all startups fail. And in 60% of the cases, it's actually due to the entrepreneurial team. So really focusing on the team and why you are the people who are going to do this and who you can potentially hire to strengthen your team is really important. And I think, to be honest, really think about what type of investor you are looking for. It's not only capital you're getting on your cap table if you take on an investor. It's also really a relationship. You're actually married until oftentimes until you go bankrupt.
Or public.
So it's really important to also think about values. Are you aligned in that sense? And I think I always say, when things go well, all investors are great. No, but it's serious. But if things are not going well, is this a type of person that you would call? And I think that's really important to consider. And then maybe one more factual thing. I think nowadays there's so much information available on the internet. So also as a founder, you can do actually a lot of preparation and homework on thinking, okay, what investors would be suitable. I think looking for warm intros should not be necessary anymore these days, because I think good investors are approachable and also know that we need to make entrepreneurship a level playing field and also be approachable for everyone. So, I do think, to be honest, a really great thing about technology, about internet, is that you can basically get in touch and reach anyone within 30 seconds. So I think as a founder with a good idea, you have so many opportunities.
Well, Dr. de Mol, Thank you so much for coming to the podcast and teaching me about VC, venture capital, because it's something that I've always been interested in. I know a lot of the people listening to the podcast are also interested in it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was really nice chatting with you.
Okay, here's my take on this. Venture capital plays a crucial role in fostering innovation and economic growth by supporting entrepreneurial ventures that might struggle to secure funding through traditional means. In Europe, the investment culture has always been a bit more cautious, a bit more risk-averse than in other large economies. But that seems to be changing. There seems to be more appetite for European venture capital, especially with all the market instability across the pond. Venture capital obviously isn't for everybody. It's not just throwing money at something and hoping you hit the jackpot. It's work. It's analysis. It's building the right teams with the right people. That's it for this time. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. Spread the word. Bye.